But for me, I think superpower wise is that I think most people with ADHD are just chaotic enough to where it allows people to find them interesting. It allows people to be like, hey, that you're kind of the life of the party or the life of the like, like you're just one of these people that goes enough that people want to figure out what's going on. They want to be around. They want to be drawn to you. A lot of times with ADHD, because you have a hard time regulating your emotions, you say exactly what you think, right? And that for I don't know how many perfectionist friends you guys have, but for your perfectionist friends, they wish they could have a little bit of that, right? So that draws them to you.
Hi, everyone. This is Joshua Hoffman and Alex Garashenko, and welcome to another episode of the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast, where we deconstruct the why and how agency owners found their success, and in season 4, focus on how we can give and receive referrals. Today, I have Aaron Fulk, the founder and CEO of Lillian James Creative, a media company that helps brands, startups, product teams, and event planners connect with audiences using their services, coaching, and strategies that are tailored to fit each situation. Welcome, Aaron.
Hi. Thanks for
Thanks for
having me
joining
on.
us.
Of course. And so where I want to start with all of this is one of our favorite topics, which is former athletes starting and running marketing agencies and media companies. So you did crew at University of Kansas, right?
Yeah,
Which
that
is
was good.
obviously D1. So what did you take from the sports world that you brought to business?
So first of all, I think anyone that would think I'm talking about sports as me as the athlete anymore at the age of 44 would be like, what? But I think the biggest thing I brought, right, and I didn't really know it till I was in my 40s, is that it's just like the mad focus. Like you have to have a goal. And so at the University of Kansas doing rowing, right? That sounds really like backwards, right? Because most people think of like cornfields here or whatever. Fields, I don't know what they think of Toto. But they do have a rowing team of most of the Big 12 major schools. And it is, more of a Title IX situation. You have to have as many girl athletes as boy athletes, but it allowed a lot of female athletes that maybe weren't like, I was a track athlete and a tennis athlete in high school. So they like recruited out of that and then brought on some people from Canada and from the East Coast. So it was kind of fun because you got to be with people that had played other sports that were just learning the sport, but then also people that had grown up in this sport, right? Versus like if you play basketball to D1, like everyone grew up playing basketball since they were like 5, right? So it was the one thing you got people from like all these different kind of like backgrounds, but you realize that we all had one goal and we were like mad focused on that goal, which I think is really what comes down to if you study business and study how good companies run and good leaders run their teams, they usually are really able to articulate that goal and how we're going to get to that goal. And that's where the real growth comes from, is getting everybody on the same page for whatever that goal is in business. So I think that's probably the biggest piece. I also think to be any sort of like, I mean, I don't know the stats and it's been a long time since I looked them up, but to be like the top of anything, to be a D1 athlete is a very small percentage of people that are able to do that, whether it be rowing, basketball, football, whatever. I think just being around those people, there's that adage that says, you never want to be the smartest or the richest or the best looking or, the funniest in the room. You want to put yourself in rooms where you're being challenged. And I think when you put yourself in like that situation where you're around these people that like we're such a small percentage of people that make it to D1 athletes, that it just prepares you to really be able to take on a lot of different things, right? So I don't know. I think it's just getting to that goal and making sure that I still do that. I like to be the brokest person in any room I go in, right? I saw something yesterday. You guys will like this. I saw a meme or something, and it's just something in my Instagram feed. And it said, "Isn't it wild that your entire career just depends on the people you talk to?" And I was like, that's true. It didn't say it depends on your degree. It didn't say it's really the networking and the people you're around, right? And so I think when you start at that level and that small percentage of people, it just allows you to grow. And then you kind of like become that person that you see that in other people and you line up with the right people.
Well, and I remember the last time we spoke, on our discovery call, you mentioned, I think it was like, yeah, I forget the exact question that I asked you, but you were saying that you have the skill to basically go into any room and be able to talk to anyone, which I'm somewhat similar, and that's the reason I had Alex and everything. And I just think, can you kind of break down why that's so important, of whether it's networking or whatever direction you want to take it? Why is it so important?
So I always say I get really lucky because I had these hot mess parents growing up, right? And so they kind of got evicted every year or had to move every year. I don't really know, but we moved every single year when I was growing up until high school. I did spend the same 4 years in high school, but I learned very early on that I didn't have a lot of time to make up a story about myself. Like I just had to be who I was, right? And so when you're switching schools in kindergarten, third grade, fifth grade, all of that, you learn to just walk in and be yourself. And I think that the faster you become more comfortable in just being who you are and not overthinking what you say and not overthinking what you do in a room full of people, that it really allows you to find the people that you're supposed to align with very, very quickly. And I think there's something in the back of all of our minds that are a little bit more attracted to, and I'm not meaning like in a dating sense or anything, but we're a little more drawn to people that know who they are. Because that's something everybody struggles with. I don't care who you are. Like we all question ourselves a little bit at some point, and the faster that you can get past that, it just allows you to find those people and be who you are. Now, it's funny that you say that though, because I've been really focused on this for a while. I can do that in a business sense, but there are still other rooms that I can't walk into, like dating wise. I'm the least insecure person at this age when it comes to dating, like post divorce and everything, that I can't do that if I'm like trying to hit on someone. But if we're talking business, I like am so confident in that. So I think it's also very situational sometimes.
I mean, you opened it up. I have to ask then, what do you think is the biggest difference?
Um, I think I think we all know what we're really good at, right? And so I think that I'm really good at business and I'm really good at networking. And for years and years and years, I've been told that I'm really good at business and I've been really good at networking. And so it's just allowed me to lean into that even more. Um, I think, I mean, if I'm just being like so transparent here, I'm not great at dating. Like I have 2 divorces under my belt. Like this is not my forte. And so I think we all lean in, right? It's why we end up in our industries because there's a great, great Steve Harvey video. It's my favorite video. I watch it at least once a week, maybe still. All 8 years of my business, I watch it maybe once a week. And it's called Jump. And he essentially talks about you have these gifts. And if you can figure out your gift, whether it is mowing lawns or being a comedian, if you can figure out that gift and lean into it, you can make money and a whole career and a whole, become a multimillionaire by leaning into that gift. And I think it kind of goes for the same with networking, right? So as soon as you figure it out in business and your industry and you lean into that, then you become great. I would love to learn it on dating, but at this point, I mean, like I really like being single too, right?
Well, joke's on you. We're gonna keep going into dating then. No,
Oh,
just,
great.
but
No, but
I
it
know.
is almost like it is interesting though, because like take the startup world, your thought of like learn from things that didn't work out, right? And you should be like you've already gone through it. So next time around, you kind of have the foresight to see, I've already dealt with that. I can
Right.
do this again.
Well,
So
okay, so I was just talking to my attorney, he's also one of my best friends. So we were at happy hour the other day. And very, very early on, I had to go through like a very little like mediation settlement. Very little. Like it was a $10,000 payout. But at that time, it might as well have been $1 million to me, right? My business was only in business for 6 months. Like we settled at 10,000 and made the problem go away. It was whatever. Um, and so I had started my business with someone that I begged to start because I was scared to do it by myself. She wasn't an entrepreneur. She wanted it out. We settled on me just buying her part out at 10,000. Like it wasn't anything like super bad. We are still friends this day, but while we are going through that, like it was the scariest thing ever, right? Well, now I like am writing $10,000 checks to nonprofit, like to galas, to sponsorships, right? And like 8 years ago when I started my business, it was the scariest number in the world. So I think you just go through these things that prepare you for the next big thing, that prepare you for the next big thing, right? Like some of the multimillionaires that own these billionaires that own these jobs will go I'm not going to mention names because if you mention names too much in this, we're going to get political and I don't want to do that. But there's some major people going through some lawsuits now that aren't even batting their eyes because they've been through so many lawsuits at a smaller level, right? That if we went through that, we would like be in a pure panic. And I think it just every single thing you go through adversity wise prepares you for like, I don't know how old you guys are, but at 44, I could literally sit down and I could take a whiteboard, like all those whiteboards you have behind you. And I could take that whiteboard and I'd be like, this, prepare me for this, prepare me for this, prepare me for this, prepare me for this. And it's like this weird journey. And I'm not university, but I'm getting there because I'm like, was this supposed to happen so that I was able to like dominate this, right? And so it's really interesting. I feel like you also get that appreciation sometimes when you go through things. As you get a little bit older, because you're like, yeah, I could have never dealt that. Or, if I were to start another business tomorrow, that business would be 7 figures. I like to brag that my business was 7 figures in less than 2 years. The next business would be 7 figures in 2 months, right? Just because I've learned all these things and I have all this network now. So yeah, I think it all just prepares you.
Well, then, I think that's really interesting. And maybe you already kind of answered this in that last question, but what does your self-talk look like the first time you're going through something?
Well, this has been a journey too, right? So my self-talk now is I've put enough people in my immediate circle, which is something I didn't have before, where I don't necessarily just rely on my self-talk. I rely on like the facts. So I used to be a lot more feelings based and now I'm a lot more facts based, which is also not always the best thing as a female, specifically business owner, right? Because sometimes I'll get too fact-based and it can come off as rigid, or some people call it bitchy, right? Which I don't always think that you guys have to deal with, more like some of us women have to, because I've become too facts, where I used to be very feeling. So I think now it just becomes more facts-based. There's not too much self-talk that goes in that, right? Like I'm just like, here's what it is. This is what can happen. What's the worst case scenario? One of my favorite mentors in the world told me, and she's had her business for 30 years. And she said, I always just figure out the very worst thing that could happen if I mess this up. And then I work backwards. And she's like, it never gets to the worst case. So I kind of do a little bit of that. And then I don't know.
I like that a lot.
The mentor said, if you're doing the best you know how to do at that time, that's all you can do.
Yeah, I think working your way from the worst, you envision the worst and you're like, okay, can I deal with that? Yeah, I can figure that out. And then you have the confidence to just go forward knowing that like that is the worst case scenario.
Right.
In reason.
Right.
No people in their underwear or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, for me, like the worst case scenario and a lot of things, right? I still end up with my kids, even if we're in a shelter, right? And my kids are like my thing. That's like, there's no worst case scenario in business that gets my kids not to still be my kids. So anything besides that is fixable.
I feel like you could fill a whole podcast just with that.
I know.
thoughts right there. I think that's great. But I guess to move to another one of our favorite topics, you dropped out of college, which I find very interesting because there's always this argument of like, is college worth it? And I know it's per person. So you can answer this question. The question is going to be, is college worth it? You can either say that for you can say that in general, like however you want to take that.
And I'm in a really funny state right now because my son's about to start his senior year and we're going through the college thing right now. So I'll give you a little bit of foresight on that. So for me, it's funny we bring up that I was a D1 athlete because I was never in a competition because I could not make grades. Right. I've now since been diagnosed with ADHD. There's tests. There's a couple. I couldn't pass algebra math to save my life. I took it 3 times, once at community college, twice at KU. They even had me in with a private tutor with a guy who played in the NBA forever. His name was Kirk Heinrich, and some football player. Those 2 passed it. We all 3 had the same tutor. We'd have to go practice together. Those 2 somehow passed college algebra. I couldn't pass it to save my life. I just could never make grades. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was more focused on once I wasn't competing anymore, I was more focused on like the party life and just the social life really is what it was. I like to say the party life, but it was really the social life, which has done really well for me. Right. So I ended up just not going to school anymore because I couldn't even, what was I going to do? Take math there every year? Fun fact, they've now dropped that math requirement for the School of Journalism because so many people dropped out for it. But now I am so I have always, and I go and speak at colleges a lot, right? And sometimes they're like, just don't bring it up unless they ask. I kind of take it out of my part of my keynote where I would say it in another situation. But here's what I think college is good for. And I say this as a mother who is currently going to be sending her son to the East Coast for school to get his theater degree, okay? Which a lot of people go, do you need a degree for theater? Fun fact, getting your BFA, your Bachelor of Fine Arts, it's as hard to get into one of those programs as a med school program, okay? I've learned this whole thing. With that said, what I think college is probably best at is what I was just talking about. Who do you meet and what rooms do you get in? So at this point in my life, some of my friends from college have been in major government. One of my really good friends is credited with coming up with the guerrilla campaign stuff for Obama. Okay? Where else am I going to meet a guy like that? One of my friends from college is a Good Morning America host. Where am I going to meet somebody like that? Right? One of my friends is the CEO of the biggest nonprofit in Kansas City. We lived on the same dorm floor, right? So I see college as an opportunity to really meet your beginning networking thing, your beginning networking. In my industry, our industry, all of our industry, there was no such thing as social media when I was in college in 1998, right? There was no such thing as, digital marketing or paid ad campaigns or really even the internet. We still had Ethernet. Okay. That's how old I am. So they didn't teach me the actual skill sets. Now there's some of the stuff, there's some of the like methods and methodology and some of the psychology that goes into marketing that I could accredit to college. But really, I think the most important part, whether you're there for 6 months or 4 years or whatever, is that network. Now, can you skip college and still make that network? Absolutely. But I think you need to, as a young person, take advantage of those years where you don't have all the extra responsibilities and start to grow that network. However you do.
And there's a lot of similarity in what you're dealing with at that time, regardless of where you come from, where you're headed at that moment in time. It's this like big melting pot and everyone's kind of going through the same journey together. And I think it allows for, even if you were to go back to like even a master's program now that was intensive there, not remote.
Yeah.
I think you can still create those relationships. And I definitely agree with you. I think that's one of the most important things from college is who you meet and what you do together.
Yeah. And I think on top of that, one, I think theater is a major that really impacts, like, a lot of your classmates are going to end up where you want to be, and having those connections, I think, is even more important there. My old co-founder, who I actually had notes that I was going to bring up earlier, and then I dumped the notes. She did crew at Penn, and she started doing cross-country skiing. So just to tie what you were saying, that she did not do crew before that, and she was doing another sport. But she went to Ivy League, and I had two co-founders, two different companies that both went to Penn. And the network that you get there, like if there's something to push you to not only just go to college, but like go for that Ivy League, there is no network better than an Ivy League network. Like it's real.
So a lot of times in the diversity conversation, which I'm huge, like we've won awards for our work in the diversity space in Kansas City. And I'm a huge advocate of diversity. And I think there's so many companies and so many cities that need to do it better. One of the things that I always remind people when I'm talking in that space is, while it looks very much the same for 100 years, it was because people were working with their friends, right? Because no matter what community, what culture, what anything we're looking at, people are working with the people they know. People are working with this, right? And I do think you need to be very intentional, but I also think it also falls on an individual to put themselves into rooms that they want to be working into, right? So like, how do I get myself into a room I want to be working to? So like, if I want to be a Wall Street person and I have the option to go to an Ivy League, why wouldn't I? Right? You said with theater, it's really important. I don't know why this is doing this. I'm sorry. But so very random, but my grandma's best friends, so they were dentists. My grandma had a dentist office here, my grandma and grandpa, and then their best friends, they're from New Jersey, dentists. Their daughter was a dancer. She went to a theater program. A guy from her theater program she became friends with He was starting two new musicals, and he said, "Would you choreograph them?" Those musicals are In the Heights and Hamilton. She is now one of the top choreographers in the whole entire world because she choreographed Hamilton because she went to school with Lynn. And that's just someone she met in college, or she would have never had that opportunity, right? So I feel like whether it's Ivy League or junior college, you figure out what do you want to do, and then you purposely put yourselves in those rooms, because the truth is we all just work with people we like and we're around.
No, I think that's a great point. And you also mentioned ADHD, which I also have. So my question well, first off, before asking the question, I can't, Alex, what percentage of guests that we have do you think like has, mentions ADHD or something? I mean, it's got to be like
The owners that we've interviewed, it's a really high percentage.
really high percentage. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Like I would say maybe 30% or more have
25,
mentioned it.
25, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So my favorite question then when someone brings it up is you talked about how it hurt you, or I don't know if that's the right word, but how it hindered you early. But again, like how about this 25 to 30% of the guests that where we think mentions it. So clearly there's something there as well. Where do you think it's become your superpower?
Yeah. So I think that, my son's been diagnosed too, so I get to see it from two different points of view. And then of course, as soon as you look it up, it's in your news feed nonstop, right? So for me, the hardest part of it for me is the regulating emotions. So where I just told you I really had to lean into facts over feelings, that's had to be a very intentional choice, because I for years let my feelings kind of navigate a lot of stuff. And which I don't know if you've seen this, but like with finances and math, like how I just talked about math, like that's never been my strong suit. But a lot of that is because, that takes focus, and ADHD, it's not super easy to focus, and your brain doesn't really necessarily work with that. Which made me a terrible employee, which is why I think a lot of your guests probably have that, because a lot of them are founders, right? And so you're not a great employee a lot of times when you have ADHD, because they want you to focus on one job. When you have ADHD, you want to do all the jobs. I saw a meme the other day that said, it's hard sometimes to find your people when you have ADHD, because you have a passion this week and that passion's gone next week, right? So you're never really bonding with people over passions, which I think is fun when you're a founder, because you get to do this and this and this and this, and it just keeps you busy enough and crazy enough wearing all the hats that's why you probably find a lot of your guests there. But for me, I think superpower wise is that I think most people with ADHD are just chaotic enough to where it allows people to find them interesting. It allows people to be like, hey, that you're kind of the life of the party, or the life of the you're just one of these people that goes enough that people want to figure out what's going on. They want to be around. They want to be drawn to you. A lot of times with ADHD, because you have a hard time regulating your emotions, you say exactly what you think, right? And that, I don't know how many perfectionist friends you guys have, but for your perfectionist friends, they wish they could have a little bit of that, right? So that draws them to you. And sometimes it's just like watching a car wreck. They're like, I'm just going to watch it and be around because it's fun, right? And so I think that's part of it too. There's a little known fact that the number one most watched TED Talk is that Simon Sinek video. But the thing about that video is it's also the most hand movements. If you go back and watch that now that I just told you, he goes like this all the time. And I do it a lot now speaking, since I've learned this over the years. But it has the most hand movements of any TED Talk also, right? And it's because we're always wanting to watch. Like if he just stood there like this, it would be more boring. And I kind of equate that to ADHD. Like I'm always doing something, so you're like, I want to watch, which allows you to grow audiences and stuff like that. And you just have like less inhibitions, which I think is really good for social media.
Alex, real quick.
It is very, yeah, good.
I have like a fidgeter. I actually don't use, I even though I have it, I don't use
so many stuff. I have so much stuff on my desk.
I know I have this little stone. I don't know if you have anything near you that
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's because you have to be doing stuff, right? So
but that's interesting. I never thought about it. That I've watched that TED Talk a lot over the years, and it's the animation. I think it does a couple of things. It amplifies his kind of emotion, and kind of you see the devotion of what he's talking about because he's so animated on it. It's not they're not just moving around. Everything's like impactful, like the way he's saying like this then leads to this, and then it's, you know, so yeah, I never thought about it that way. That's really cool.
Well, it's kind of, so since we're on the marketing podcast, it's kind of the same as with social media. You have to make some sort of movement within the first 3 seconds now, right? And all these videos that are going majorly viral right now, that are, people are like, how are they going so viral? It's because if you really look, it's within the first half a second, there's some major movement, whether they're holding a camera and pulling it. And I'm not saying like this real like deep content, but we've become so just inundated with so much stuff that we have to have something. Our brains are just like, our frontal lobes are like, right? And so the more that you add some of that, and so I don't know, maybe that's a stretch to say that's why people, that's my superpower in ADHD, is because I just can't stop, and it's like a car wreck. But I think it
I'm
does.
gonna go and stretch to, you told us that you took a was it an elite business class back in 2018 that almost destroyed your business. And I'm wondering if there's a connection there because it provided you with so much structure, whereas you were operating in an unstructured way that was more natural.
Right.
And you were able to build from that. Can you talk about that class and what it did for you, and maybe connection to ADHD, if there is one?
Yeah. So I got into this business class. I just remember being so excited. So you had to be in business for at least 2 years and be at a certain income level. So I was at that certain income level within the first year, but I asked them if I could apply, and they said, no, you have to be in business for 2 years. And I thought, okay, well, so in 2 years I got into it, and it takes 16 businesses in the Midwest every year, and that's it, right? So there's a lot of people that don't make it into it. So I was really excited. I get in, and it was by far the smallest business in the class because I was still, just in business for 2 years. And I was probably at the time maybe the youngest business owner in there by 5-10 years, and definitely the least quote unquote professional business in there, right? So there was a lot of manufacturing companies, financial companies. Everybody else was like wearing heels if they were women and suits if they were men. And then I was, I love to show up in a hoodie and some tennis shoes. And so it definitely, like, first day I was like a little bit intimidated because I was like, what have I gotten myself into? But then we dove into the content, and the content was essentially, you were taking your operations and just making sure. So they do like a financial collision, and they dive into your operations, which it's very different to run an operations of a manufacturing company than a marketing agency, right? So like, it was this overall class, and then you were supposed to take it and apply it to your business, and you got a business coach through it, through the SBA and stuff like that. I was not much, and now I understand. 8 years down the line, I understand why you had to be in business for 2 years. It's because you needed the maturity of a business. And I assume that they probably thought I would have that maturity because of my age. I always say I matured a lot later. I had a kid very early on, and so I just survived, and then I kind of matured a little bit. And it took figuring out my ADHD and stuff like that. But I was not mature enough to be in this class. Let's say that, okay? I was 38, but I was not mature enough to be in this class, because what I should have done is I should have got into that class, and I should have been like, that's great that that's a process that works for you. Is there something I could take from that and improve my current processes? But instead I was like, it's almost like, have you guys ever seen like when you have a new salesperson and they do so good at first because they really don't know anything, they're just excited, but then they start to learn the products and stuff, and then they start over explaining it, right? And they start, and like eventually they're like scaring people from working for you. A lot of salespeople, you see them go like this high thing, and then there's this dip, and then it starts to come back up after a few months, right? That's kind of like the dichotomy of a lot of salespeople without good training. And so I got into that, and I was like learning all this stuff that you're supposed to know for business, and my business wasn't doing any of that. And instead of being like, but we're still growing and we're still doing really well, I was like, but we're supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to hire this. I'm supposed to not be working on any client accounts. I'm supposed to have this type of, processes and this type of system. And at the time we were using a CRM as a project management system, and it worked for us. But I was like, switched everything over to this major project management system, which was a huge financial thing. The project management system was not the right cut, right? So it ended up taking time and money that we should have never had, and brought in a person to run my operations that I should have, I didn't know enough of what I needed to bring in an operation person. I just knew I was being told I needed to have someone run operations. You're not an operations person. And so, I hired someone that I thought would be good at operations without understanding what that looked like. And I ended up losing $1 million that year, and I almost lost my business. And it literally, literally took me almost losing my business to sit down and go, I had to make a decision if I wanted to save my business at the time. And what was I going to just tuck my tail between, my legs and say, hey, team, we should have never done this. That was a bad decision on my part. And then also say, hey, we're going to lean into this. And I really had to like break down the pieces. And luckily, because I talked earlier about who I surround myself with, I had some really great mentors, friends, that helped me figure all that out and, reminded me it's okay. This is your first business. Like the fact you're still in business, the fact you lost $1 million and you're still in business is actually a win here, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think it just, had I had the emotional maturity, I would have been like, oh, here's some great things I can take away from this program, implement them in my business slowly, methodically, all of that, which probably that's when the ADHD was hard because I'm like, oh, I learned that. I got to do it today. I got to do it today. Right. And so, if I were to take that class today, this now at my business, I think it'd be very beneficial. But then it almost broke my business.
Yeah, I wanna double click into that because I think it's one of the better we're hitting a lot of good topics on this one. It's one of the better topics, which I always forget who mentioned it, and I always say I'm gonna go back and look, but she called it dumb tax, and dumb tax is basically when you're going through something for the first time, you don't know what is the right move or the wrong move, and someone tells you to do something, you just do it, and it turned out to be dumb tax. So do you get the idea of dumb tax what other dumb tax can you highlight that you have went through?
So I'll just tell you, this is probably my biggest mistake in business to this day.
Perfect.
And it happened very early on. I had an insane team member who showed up in my office. She actually worked for a company we were trying to bring on, and she showed up in my office. I thought she was going to sign on the dotted line. And she said, I want to work here, not there. And I said, well, I don't have a job because I was very new. And she said, anything like a commission only job? And I said, well, I guess I could teach you how to do sales. I always did sales before. I'm a salesperson, but I'll do commission only. And she was insane. She was a sponge. She was great. She was a good person. And she was amazing. She took some time off personally. Some stuff happened. At some point, she got it in her mind that she thought she was going to be able to be let go. It was never the plan. It was something that she was kind of dealing with internally. And I had been taught or learned or believed or whatever that as her boss and with HR rules and everything like that, like I couldn't dive too into some medical stuff, right? Like I was trying to like find this line of like, but then also protect the business. And, I end up getting an employee attorney or something, some attorney that's $400 an hour, who was like just giving me the employer advice, right? And we happened to be at the time moving states. So I'm in Kansas City, so it's Kansas and Missouri. Kansas is very employer friendly. Missouri is very employee friendly. Missouri's the cool side to work on, right? That's where everybody wants to be. This is back when we used to go to the office. That's where everyone wants to be. We were building out this really cool office. I really didn't know the difference in the laws when I started that until I got this employee attorney. And so the employee attorney said, here's the deal. You need to make a decision. But if you move over to Missouri and you're still having these issues, you could put yourself in some pretty scary trouble. And so I let this girl go. And it was, to this day, the worst decision. She had built such a network in Kansas City, and she never said anything terrible about us. She ended up actually, it worked out really well for her. She got a great job at a tech company, and the sales skills she learned, because she had never been in a sales position, she was able to take that and move on. But for my business, it put a halt on growth. It majorly hurt not just our sales, but our company culture, because she was such an important part of the team. And she was also somebody that I really like trusted. At the end of the day, even though we were going through that, I really trusted her, which it is very hard to find a good team that you trust, with team members you trust. And the team trusted her. And to this day, now that it's 6 years later, I know what I would do, because now I've dealt with the same situation with a couple other employees that are still with me, right? I've become more empathetic, but like I understand, like we're all going to go through stuff. We ended up changing a lot of our like PTO stuff and stuff like that, and we have free mental health care, because while I can't always talk to everybody about everything, I can give them resources and stuff like that. And so it majorly changed the business, but it's one of these things that I'm like, I had to lose her to become this better leader, become this better business, and do all of this. And I mean, I would love to give her a job back, but now she's like soaring, and I can't match this tech company she's at. And funny enough, she's moved 2 neighborhoods over from me. We just reconnected, and she's moved 2 neighborhoods over from me. And she's just like, she's killing life, and I'm so proud of her. But it was definitely probably the most costly decision I've ever made.
It's great that you have the introspective to like look into it and make changes for it. I mean, like you said before, like that's the best you can do.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. I saw you going through the dumb tax in your head and trying to choose the right one. So I think that was a great.
Yeah, there was a few to choose from.
As we all, I guess I didn't mean it in that way, but no, I think I think when we're doing things the first time, which Alex and I have both done, also starting companies, man, the dumb tax is just left and right. So I even think Alex and I should start a whole podcast that's just called Dumb Tax, and I think it would get like a lot of
that would actually be great, because I would love to dive into like the implementation of that
right?
that business course that you took. It's like, yeah,
like you do the dumb tax even as a parent. I don't know if you guys have kids, but even like I have a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I'm such a better parent to my 12-year-old, right? Because I learned how to listen the first time with my 17-year-old. Right.
Yeah.
I know I'm going too far, and maybe we'll take this out of the podcast, but if we had dumb tax and 80% of it was business related, and then 20% like every once a month we did like a kids one or something like that'd be a good show. All right.
That would be a good show.
I
like it.
I feel like we have 20 concepts. We gotta start.
I know.
Now I'd like to learn a little bit more about the firm Lily and James Creative, because part of our goal, obviously, for the podcast is to build this referral network among our guests that promotes collaboration and support. So again, a lot of what we're trying to do is understand what your business is, and if there's any guests that we've had prior that can either use your help or you can use their help. That's what we're trying to really do with this podcast. So I'll go through a few questions that'll just kind of help that spark the communication and relationship and referrals and everything. Pretty easy question. What services do you guys provide?
So we are a full service agency, but we specialize in social media. So we started out originally as a social media agency, specifically in LinkedIn, and very early on. So we really, so we don't have a niche, but we really kill it at B2B. Right. And so we started out, I just wanted to be a social media company. That's all I wanted. And there wasn't really social media companies 8 years ago, right? There were agencies, but there wasn't just like, I had worked at an agency and they didn't even offer social media services yet, right? Which is crazy to think of now. Very quickly, I think like first client, their website was so bad. I was like, God, I don't want to have to build websites, but here we are, right? And then I was like, oh, I don't want to have to do paid ads. We didn't even start offering paid ads till a couple of years ago, but we were organic so hard. Like it's just the analytics on organic are so hard to prove, and ROI and stuff like that, that we kept all of our clients were working with like a paid ad agency and then us for the organic. And that paid ad agency would always end up, whatever agency it would be, they'd always end up going with the paid ad agency when they were reevaluating contracts because they could offer everything. So eventually I was like, we're just going to have to play the paid ad game, right? And we do it really well now. Luckily, we built a good team around that, but we really kill it at B2B social media. And then you just have all the things to get you there, right? Like so I'm in our brand new office, like it's still being built out, but all our office is just studios now because we do so much video, podcast, photography, right? So everyone works from home, and then we have studio space. I mean, we've got some hot desks here, but we have studio space where clients come in, and we do we're getting into the past 2 years, a ton of personal brands. So managing.
You mentioned websites, and I think that's a really good example that I just want to touch on real quick because obviously we're a dev shop over here, and we help marketing agencies with development work. And when you get, and I'm actually going to ask a more specific question related to this after this, but in terms of websites, start getting these requests. It's not your core competency right now. How do you handle that? Are you white labeling? Are you bringing someone in-house? What does that look like?
So I think that's just a case-to-case basis. So right now we'll build you a little 5-page WordPress website. Like the team does that, right? So for like a personal brand or something, I just need a speaker website, we can handle that. Now, if you're somebody that needs a whole like back end or something like that, we don't touch that. So I can help out and refer people, understand, help you make decisions on some of the CRMs and stuff like that you want with that. But I mean, we don't do anything big. We don't do any custom coding. I mean, when I say websites, I'm talking small. I'm a speaker. I need a placeholder. I'm an author. I'm a small dentist office, but nothing like insane.
So what do you usually do, or how do you outsource to other marketing agencies in that case? Or do you, I guess is the question.
I mean, right now, if I'm being really honest, I usually let my clients find their own. And if they ask me, and they usually do, like they already have some sort of idea, right? Their CMO already has, like, have you heard of these 3 agencies? But that's mostly just because I have done it pre-COVID. I kind of had a referral source. And then so many businesses closed during COVID. And I kind of quit talking to everybody during COVID, right? Because
that did happen. Yeah.
So I just haven't done a good job of building that up, which is why I probably ended up on this podcast anyways, right? It's because I want a good resource of that. Andrew Morgans, who you've had on this podcast, the second somebody says Amazon, I pull his name out because him and I have done a good job of continuing to stay on top of what each other are doing. So I think, again, it's all about who you know, right? So like,
I actually have not had him on the podcast yet. I knew him from my old job. Yeah. And I didn't even think about that. I will definitely reach out to him. He's on like podcasts left and right. So I know he'll probably say yes to that. Hello, Andrew Morgans, if you're listening. And then kind of switch that question around. How can you work with other marketing agencies, or what services can you partner with other agencies? So in other words, what do agencies tend to reach out to you for? And maybe you kind of already answered it, but would love to hear more.
No, so like we do work with an agency. They actually just got acquired, which is so awesome. But it's a big sports media agency. And so they're making all of the content, but then they're handing it to their clients, and their clients weren't putting it anywhere. And I'm talking like NFL, MLB, right? So some of the smaller sports. And so like they've been referring if different parts of the social media. We get most of our referrals come to us because I don't feel like enough people understand LinkedIn correctly. So you can be killing it on TikTok and Instagram, and then you try to put that content on LinkedIn, and it does not work. And I have been traveling speaking about LinkedIn since 2017, since before anybody even realized you could put content out there. And I've been lucky enough to have a very good relationship with LinkedIn. They've flown me out there, and I get to be a part of every one of their beta tests. So usually LinkedIn is what we get referred for a lot, which then turns into a whole, even to do LinkedIn, you got to be able to do a lot of things these days.
Perfect. And a few questions that I tend to ask at the end. If you had to teach something to other marketers, what would it be?
Probably LinkedIn. Well, here's the thing. So LinkedIn is our number 1 referral source for 8 years in a row. Okay. 80% of social web leads in the B2B space come from LinkedIn. While I think that we're better at LinkedIn now as a society, I think it's still the most unutilized for businesses. I don't think they understand it. I don't think it's especially, which is so interesting to me, especially Gen Z and millennials. Millennials are getting there, but I Gen Z legitimately barely knows what LinkedIn is, which is so crazy to me because they're so good at social media. LinkedIn is the only space on the internet where the Mark Cubans are still checking their own profiles, right? The Mark Cubans of the world. So we're talking about networking. We're talking about who you know. You guys, I literally have made some of the most insane connections on LinkedIn of like actual real life major both celebrities, athletes, motivational speakers, because they're there, right? Anyone that understands money knows that LinkedIn's the space to be on. So it would probably be in like, I used to do this speech in 2017. I feel like everybody on the internet stole it. I'd like to think I'm the first that had it. I might be wrong, but I used to call it leveraging LinkedIn, which is now what everybody says anytime they speak of LinkedIn. But I have proof that I spoke about it in 2017 and called it leveraging LinkedIn. And so that's probably the space I would be at. But now it sounds so, it's like the word empower, right? Now it's just so overused.
Innovative or yeah, yeah,
There's
exactly.
some of those words.
That's
So,
right.
but probably LinkedIn. That's my
No,
brand.
I'm glad you kind of talked about that a little bit. Not to go into this because I know we're towards the end, but I started in sales and I come from the sales world, and honestly, when we set up sequences that does email, LinkedIn, email, call, most of our responses come in from LinkedIn. So, and you were mentioning making connections on there. It sounds like that used to be Twitter, where it's like, oh, you can really get to those people on Twitter. And I think to your point, most of those like non-business social medias, they kind of have their ups and then they trickle down. And I'm sure LinkedIn had their up, but I don't see their trickle down as heavy. Maybe you're saying with the younger generations, but in the same way that, like, again, people used to be on Twitter and then you can message the DM and make a connection there. It's a little bit harder on Twitter now. And I think it's still there on LinkedIn is kind of what you're saying as well.
Twitter's become super divisive, right? So I think that's that piece. I don't think younger generations are going to bring it down. I think it's weird because it's like you just don't get on there till you're older. But when I go speak at colleges and I talk about it and I talk about the power of it, there'll be a room full of 300 people and one or two of them will get on there and send me a message, right? And maybe like 20 connect with me, one or two will send a message and start doing content. And the thing that I find so interesting about LinkedIn is like the older generations, and I'm putting myself in there, want to support these kids coming out of college, right? So I actually think you can kill it on there if you're coming out of school. Like I think that there's a lot of people on LinkedIn that want to be supportive, but there's just not enough people there to support in that younger generation. So I think that the smart ones are there, and I think they eventually all end up there. So I don't see it like trending down.
I agree. Yeah, yeah.
But I just think that if I was 20, I'd be killing it.
Uh, and then I love that. And then last question, maybe my favorite question, any books, podcasts, or newsletter recommendations that can be in business, can be in marketing. It doesn't have to be anything that is kind of popping up in your head right now.
Okay. So if you're in marketing, and this is one of my favorite, it's so boring, but if you're geeked out like me, this is my favorite thing to do. So there is a YouTube. Oh God, I should find the name of it. But essentially, so why are all the names? The father of marketing. Why did I just lose his whole name? You know, the guy that came up with advertising a million years ago, and I just lost his name.
Popping up in my head is the flow guy, which has nothing to do with
It
this.
starts with a B. I just lost it. Anyways, do you know who his first cousin is? Sigmund Freud. Okay. They're first cousins, and it talks about, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say we interviewed Freud's like granddaughter or something on this episode on here. Sorry, continue.
No, that's good. And I'm looking at founder of advertising. Yeah, this is not.
Thomas Barrett?
No,
No, I know who you're talking about.
It's Bernice. It's Bernice, right? I think his name's Bernice. It doesn't matter. Anyways, there's a YouTube thing. There's a YouTube documentary about him and his first cousin being Sigmund Freud. And it's like an
Edward
yeah,
Bernays?
Bernice, yeah. It's like an 8-hour documentary and it's boring. It is insane how every single thing in advertising, it goes from 100 years ago to today, from their very first campaign to today, how much of it is based in psychology lessons It's probably what made me very best at my job. So that's a great watch. I get so many newsletters every day. So one of the things I do is I subscribe to every advertising newsletter I can find. And then in the mornings, I pay attention to which headlines I want to open up. Right. And I keep track of that because I feel like you're all marketing. And if I don't want to open up every single one of you, I'm going to pay attention to these two today because they're on top of what it is. And then so I do that and make notes of that. I spend about an hour to 2 hours every day just Googling stuff, reading stuff, listening to podcasts, listening to YouTubes. I do a lot of my research right now on TikTok. So I'll go in and I'll filter within the past 24 hours what's gone viral in both the marketing space, the business space, the attorney space, anywhere where we have clients. So I don't like to do it like all time, like the top videos ever, because I feel like 2020 TikTok was very different than 2024. But if you're still getting your stuff to go viral in 2024 or what's trending in 2024, that's what I need to be paying attention to. But that documentary, let me tell you, let me see if I can figure out what it's called.
That's great. While you look that up, I love what you just said, and no one's kind of mentioned that in the whole like, let me put too much in front of me, and then that'll let my eyes go to the ones that are actually interesting, and then I can learn from that. Rather than if you only get two, you're just seeing the same thing, or not the same thing, but you're not getting multiple data points.
No, I'll sign up for anything and then, yeah, figure it out. I'm going to have to find this and I'll send it to you guys. It's a really boring documentary unless you really want to learn how to be good at advertising. And then it's like insane. Like, okay, so like one of the lessons I learned from there, which I just think is so insane, is instant cakes. So they were in charge, this guy was in charge of the first advertising campaign for instant cakes. So back in the 30s or 20s or 30s or something, right? They came up with the instant cakes, right? And the whole entire like newspaper ads where this woman just cake, no apron on, nothing. It says do nothing. All you had to do was add water. Okay. And they sold no cakes. Like their sales were terrible. And they were like, why? This is making women's lives so much easier. So then they went in and they did focus groups and stuff. And what they found is that at that time, women didn't really work, right? Their entire like existence was based off being a cook in the house and a mom and whatever else, Harrison Butker thinks we should be, right? It was all based on that. And so what they found is they found that through all these focus groups, that if they added an egg and they showed the woman in an apron cracking an egg, all of a sudden she became part of the process and the cake started flying off the shelves. The egg didn't even, I don't know if they still do, but back then the egg didn't even need to be in the cake. But because they added the cake, it now gave the woman more value. And so they put that into their advertising, and that's what made it start to soar. So just that psychology piece is insane.
Yeah. People place a lot of value in being involved in the process. I feel like that's why like those model planes that people build, or like the dinosaurs that you build out of the bones, like the wooden bones when you're a kid, cost more than just buying it.
Well,
and there's more value there.
Have you been paying attention to Legos lately? Those major Legos they're becoming more expensive and more of a collector's item by like some of the athletes and the 1% more than ever, because I think it's part of the process. Which is just crazy. Legos have been around forever, right? And now you got to go pay $500 for a Lego set. Like, could you imagine in the 80s if we would have even thought that? But because there's so much stuff that you're not a part of now, especially with AI and stuff, people want to do some of that stuff. And it's just that psychology piece, which is at the end of the day, advertising, what advertising is.
Some of those little pieces are like hundreds of dollars. There's a Lego store near us or near me. And I walked in and there was a little, one of the people I work with loves Harley Quinn. She collects everything Harley Quinn. I found a Harley Quinn Lego. It was like $200. It's like this big.
Like
insane.
Yeah.
I also want to say your little Harrison Butker, you threw it in there real quick. You're from Kansas City, so I guess it's very top of mind.
From Kansas City, and fun fact, I was an extra on Catching Kelsey. I'm a big Swiftie, so.
But I heard that real quick, and then yeah, that's ridiculous what he said, but I'm not supposed to. As we come up to the end, yeah, I know we're not supposed to, but some people say some ridiculous things. As we come up to the end of the episode, I just want to give you an opportunity to mention how people can find you and anything else you'd like to end with.
Yeah, so it's Aaron Fulk on LinkedIn. That's where my biggest following is. So that probably be the best Beth Peace, aaronfolk.com, Aaron Fulk, LillianJamesCreative.com. So I have an unhinged TikTok, but
not going to say
I
that.
know I'm putting an Aaron Fulk.
Let me say that handle out loud.
Look at me, linked it first before you make any judgments.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for those of you who've learned something new from this episode, please consider giving us a like or a follow so we can continue getting the highest quality guests. And as always, thank you for listening. Aaron, this is great. You were like the easiest guest. Thank you so much. And I feel like you shared so much valuable information. So thank you.
Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, DevNoodle. DevNoodle provides marketing agencies with the ability to offer their clients unlimited website design, build, and management services with fixed monthly plans. If website design, development, and maintenance is holding your agency back from growing, please reach out to us at devnoodle.com, where we make websites easy for you and easy for your clients. devnoodle.com.